The story of the Oyo Empire, it's this incredible saga of a dramatic rise and an even more dramatic fall. But what if I told you that the collapse of this mega powerful West African state is actually why we have some of the incredible music we listen to today? Seriously, in this explainer, we're going to trace that unbelievable connection, so let's dive right in.
Yeah, this question, it really gets to the absolute heart of the Oyo story. I want you to think about it like this. Their whole system of power, it was a classic double-edged sword. It's what made them so powerful, but it also contained the seeds of its own destruction. Kind of poetic, right? And look, make no mistake, we're talking about a major power here. For more than 200 years, we're talking from the 1600s all the way to the 1800s, oil's influence was just massive, stretching across a huge chunk of West Africa. Yeah, politically, militarily, they were absolutely a force to be reckoned with. Okay, so how did they do it? How did they build all that power? Well, it all came down to this really unique, kind of complex political setup. A system that was built on a really delicate, carefully managed tension. And Oyo's roots, they go way, way back. I mean, the capital city was settled centuries before the kingdom was even officially a thing. But it's really in the 1600s that things kick into high gear, when Oyo starts transforming from just a regional kingdom into a legit full-blown empire. All right, so at the very top of this whole structure, you've got the Alafin. That's the king. He was the main guy, the highest judge, the ultimate political authority. On paper, his power was supposed to be absolute. But, and this is a huge but, here's the twist. The Alafin didn't rule alone. Not even close. His power was kept in check by the Oil Macy, this super powerful state council made up of 7 chiefs. And these guys weren't just, advisors. They were kingmakers. They were military leaders. They were the only ones who could actually challenge the king himself. And you can see that tension playing out right here. So on one side, you have the Alafam with all this power. He's appointing governors, he's the final court of appeal. But then, on the other side, the Oyo Messi held the ultimate trump cards. They're the ones who pick the next Alafan. Their leader is the commander of the army, and this is the big one, they could just get rid of a king they didn't like. And I mean, just listen to how final their power could be. Getting rid of a king wasn't like, say, an impeachment. Nope, it was basically a death sentence. It was this constant threat hanging over his head that kept the elephant in line. And that's what created this incredibly fragile balance of power that defined Oyo politics for generations. And you know what? For a long time, this system worked. I mean, it worked spectacularly. It fueled this incredible period of huge expansion and prosperity. This was the empire's golden age, when that double-edged sword of Oyo power was at its absolute sharpest. Just to give you a sense of scale, at its peak, the empire covered almost 150,000 square kilometers. To put that in perspective, that's bigger than the entire country of Greece. It just shows you the incredible reach of their political and military power all across West Africa. So, how'd they maintain this dominance? Well, it was built on a few key pillars. First off, their cavalry was legendary. It let them project power all across the savannah. They also controlled these huge trade networks, pulling in taxes and tribute that paid for the whole operation. And it wasn't just conquest and taxes either. Oyo had these booming local industries, making textiles and iron goods that were traded all over the place. But remember that double-edged sword we talked about? Well, the very system of checks and balances that made Oyo's rise possible, it eventually became the engine of its own destruction. That delicate balance started to tip, and pretty soon, that sword of power started to turn inward. And this wasn't a quick thing. The chaos just built and built over an entire century. After a long, stable reign, suddenly the Oyo Messi just starts deposing kings left and right. We're talking 9 of them in just a couple of decades. This created a massive power vacuum, which let this one guy, Basarungailu, swoop in and basically take control, ruling through a series of puppet kings. He was eventually overthrown, but only because an Alafin did something nobody had done before. He called in help from outside forces. And that right there was the turning point. Because sure, defeating Besoran Guy might have looked like a win for the king, but what it really did was break the whole system. For the very first time, all these provincial commanders and warlords saw that the capital wasn't invincible. They saw it could be challenged and beaten. The balance of power was shattered for good. So yeah, this broken system, it's going to lead directly to the empire's final total collapse. But here's the thing. What happens next is what makes this story so incredible. Because out of the ashes of this fallen empire, a cultural legacy was born that would literally cross the Atlantic and then come all the way back again. So, following that new precedent, in 1796, a provincial commander named Afanja leads a mutiny. He forces another Oliphane's death. And that was the final crack in the dam. Provinces started breaking away, new rival powers popped up, and by 1836, the great capital city, Oyo-Ile, was sacked and abandoned. The empire was officially over. The collapse threw the whole region into decades of war. And right in the middle of all that turmoil, the transatlantic slave trade caused this massive forced dispersal of the Yoruba people. They and their incredibly rich culture were carried across the ocean to places like Brazil and Cuba and Sierra Leone. But then, something totally amazing happened. After the slave trade was abolished, many of these freed people and their kids and their grandkids, they started to come back. And they brought all these new influences with them, things you can literally still see today in the unique architecture of coastal cities like Lagos. But they didn't just bring back building styles. Oh no, they brought back music. So in this cultural melting pot of Lagos, you had these Latin rhythms they'd picked up in the Americas and new instruments they'd brought back, like guitars and accordions. And all of that started to fuse with the deep-rooted Yoruba musical traditions. And this incredible cross-pollination, it gave birth to completely new sounds. What came out of it were genres like juju and highlife music, and these sounds, which, remember, were born from the tragic collapse of an empire, they would go on to take over the world. I mean, look at this. You've got legends like King Sunny Ade playing to massive crowds in London. It's just amazing. And that cultural DNA, it didn't stop there. You can draw a direct line from the influence of Juju and highlife straight to the sounds of modern Afrobeats, which is, only one of the biggest musical movements on the entire planet today. So you go from the fall of an empire all the way to a global Spotify playlist. What an incredible, totally unexpected journey. Which, of course, leaves us with one last thought. The story of the Oyo Empire really shows us that culture is never just one thing. It's not static. It's this living, breathing organism that gets shaped by history and tragedy and incredible resilience. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other hidden histories are out there, just waiting to be heard in the rhythms and melodies that fill our everyday lives?